for having me here this morning. I'm very honored to be here. And I was actually here just a few weeks ago. I was invited as a guest panelist by the Latino Student Association to speak about minorities in the workforce. And they did very well coordinating the event. They sent us questions ahead of time so we could prepare. But of course, while we were there, they had to mix it up a little and ask us some impromptu questions. So one of the questions they asked was, who inspired us and why? So I took a deep sigh. I looked at everybody in the audience, and I answered so deeply and so profoundly, and I said, my mom. And so in the Boyle family, there's my daughter, who is 13 years old, and I tried to wake her up to come this morning, and she said, no, she'd rather sleep in. And there's my mom, and then there's myself. And during my campaign in 2017, when I first entered politics, my mom was my biggest supporter. She made phone calls, she rallied the volunteers, she knocked on doors, she lost hours of sleep just to make sure everything was right. And so from that, everybody, well not everybody, but majority of people in Newport News in the political arena, they all know who Mrs. Boyle is because she made herself well known. But more importantly, my daughter got to witness the support of my mom, and she got to see how hard we worked for something that mattered to us. And my daughter might not understand how monumental the win was, and she might not know the import that history was made when I became the first African-American Commissioner of Revenue for the city of Newport News. See, my mom was born in the 60s, I was born in the 80s, and my daughter was born in the early 2000s. So this campaign and the win, it meant something different to all of us. So there's 3 generations, right? And every time one of us needs advice, we all have to remember we're all coming from different eras. And our realities are all different. And while they do connect at various points, the truth is intersectionality is different for all of us. Being discriminated against or being at a disadvantage because we are women are all forms of oppression. Oppression has different levels. Sometimes it is obvious, sometimes it's permitted, sometimes, depending on what point in history, globally, it was legal, and maybe it still is legal in some places. But oppression is only one-sided, and it is always the wrong side to be on. In the U.S., our Declaration proudly states that all men are created equal. I'm assuming they meant women in there as well. And while that was being written, Native Americans were forced into reservations. Black men and women were locked in chains and forced to work in fields. Japanese Americans were locked in internment camps, and women were written out of the economic and political future of America. And while some tried to keep the doors locked and make decisions for us in closed meetings, the oppressed, the wrongly discriminated, the disadvantaged realized something. It became obvious that while we were locked out of these closed-door, smoke-filled rooms where decisions were made, we were locked out together. Together in our differences, together in our diversity, and we realized that diversity is really good for our communities, good for our economy, and good for our government. So women, past and present, globally resist and make positive impacts for all of us. Women like Susan B. Anthony, who stood up for women's suffrage, women's property rights, and the abolition of slavery in America. Mother Teresa, who spent most of her life in India helping people. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first elected female head of state in Africa. And my new personal hero, Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, who changed gun laws after the tragic shooting. And the most recent thing that really touched my heart is that she made a speech wearing a hijab and quoting the Prophet Muhammad to really bring the people together and show that New Zealand does care. And I could name so many more women who have helped impact our future. And we cannot dismiss that these social pioneers have a purpose that's so much larger and so much higher than themselves. Their purpose was out of reach of any preference they may or may not have had. Their belief in a better world was better than the world we live in, and better than the individual themselves, which is a reminder to us that none of us are perfect, but our purpose can be. Our world isn't perfect, our schools, our environment, our corporate sector is not perfect. But our efforts for safer classrooms, a cleaner environment, and an economy that's inclusive for all workers and their rights, those efforts can be perfect. To accomplish this, we're going to have to build this together. All genders, all races, all regions, and all cultures. And it's going to start with women. Now we know as women, the pressure to be normal, to prove ourselves, and to fit in is also prevalent. But we're making progress, and I always say progress takes time. So if more women of influence open up their doors and themselves to have conversations that are so necessary for emerging women in leadership, and they just say, this is how I got there. These are the steps that I took. Let me see how I can help you be truly as amazing as you can be. If we do that, then we will have more representation and more progress throughout our communities, throughout Virginia, and globally. And it will be because of women like us in this room who got up really early in the morning to come to this breakfast and who've been coming to this conference for 3 days, who understand that discrimination of any kind is the highest disrespect to the fabric of the world. And earlier this month, I've been speaking a lot this month, which is a great thing, but earlier this month I was able to speak in DC at a fashion show. It's called Indie Fashion Week, and it's for emerging fashion designers. And I was able to speak of the value of brand and labels, the quality of content, the purpose of the product. However, when it comes to people, labels play a whole different role. I mean, we see that history has tried labels again and again, and there's still some fragments of society that can continue to think that this is okay. But they think it's okay to use yesterday's labels and trends in today's world and limit who we are and who we can become. But those of us here, we know that people can transcend labels. The quality of their character is the real content that matters, and their purpose is what gives them value, because people are not products. The difference between labels and limits is simple. A label will tell us what something is, but it is not capable of telling us what it can become. Our past had women labeled as homemakers, busy cooking and cleaning in the kitchen, and what our past did not know is that we could not only roll the dough in 1919, but in 2019 we can raise the dough in the U.S. House and make policies and biscuits and do both at the same time. See, we are the leaders and visionaries in this room. We are leading and we are creating the future. And we're pushing those limits. And the only limits we're taking into the future the only labels we're taking into the future are our labels. Labels that will brand our communities, all of our genders, all of our cultures as equal, as valued, and as necessary. Because we refuse to accept yesterday's labels as a way forward. See, I told you, for our daughters, for our mothers, and for ourselves, it was a different time. We all grew up in different eras. Well, this time, we're all here. We're in this moment, you and I. And in the words of Congresswoman Maxine Waters, we are reclaiming our time. Because this time, we know that discrimination is a byproduct of cultural stagnation, and diversity is a byproduct of cultural revelation. So we're going to keep moving forward. This time is our time and our future, and nothing, absolutely nothing, trumps our future. So I'm here to tell you today that the global status of women and girls is far from perfect, but it is whatever we commit to. So now let's start committing to each other.